8:22 a.m. Seoul, South Korea. A Wednesday morning in early March. Temperature 41 degrees Fahrenheit, overcast. A thin wind coming down from the north, carrying the smell of coal smoke from across the DMZ. The city of 10 million was fully awake and fully in motion. Subway cars packed, highways gridlocked, school buses running their routes. The Han River bridges dense with commuter traffic moving in both directions. The Korean Stock Exchange had been open for 52 minutes. In Gangnam, the glass towers of the financial district were already lit from top to bottom. In Yongno, the street vendors were setting up. In Itaewon, the breakfast restaurants were filling up with the early shift crowd. Seoul was, in every visible respect, the most normal Wednesday morning it had ever had. 44 miles to the north, on the other side of the demilitarized zone, the Korean People's Army had been awake since 3 a.m. What the KPA had been assembling along the DMZ for the previous 8 weeks was, by any honest accounting, the heaviest concentration of artillery firepower positioned against a single city since the siege of Leningrad. Over the course of those 8 weeks, moving equipment only at night, only under weather cover, only in increments small enough to be explained as routine repositioning to the surveillance analysts who watched every square kilometer of the Korean peninsula from space, the KPA had forward deployed 172 long-range artillery systems into prepared firing positions within range of central Seoul. 44 170mm Coxswain self-propelled guns, each capable of firing a 100-kilogram shell over 50 kilometers. 61 240mm multiple launch rocket systems, each capable of putting a warhead the size of a small car into a city grid square from 40 kilometers away. 67 122mm BM-21 Grad rocket launchers, providing suppressive volume fire. And in 11 hardened tunnel systems, bored into the granite of the Kaesong Highlands, 340 152mm and 130mm field guns positioned to add direct fire volume to the opening barrage. The target was not a military installation. The target was Seoul itself, the financial district, the transportation hubs, the bridges over the Han River. The plan, designated by the KPA General Staff as Operation Steel Rain, called for a sustained artillery barrage lasting 60 minutes that would fire an estimated 30,000 rounds into the South Korean capital. The mathematical center of the targeting grid was Gwanghwamun Square, 400 meters from the Blue House. The objective was not military victory. It was the destruction of the South Korean political will to resist through the creation of civilian casualties on a scale the world had not seen since the Second World War. Force Seoul to the negotiating table. Force Washington to choose between escalation against a nuclear-armed state and concession. Create in one morning a new political reality on the Korean peninsula. At 8:22 a.m., the KPA artillery commander, operating from a hardened facility beneath the hills south of Kaesong, transmitted the fire mission order. 172 artillery systems and 340 tunnel-mounted guns began their preparation to fire simultaneously. Autoloaders cycled. Breech blocks closed. Commanders confirmed their grid references. Firing pins were set. They had made 5 catastrophic mistakes. The first mistake: they believed the 8-week repositioning had been conducted without detection. It had not. The NRO's satellite constellation, combined with synthetic aperture radar analysis from 3 separate collection platforms and signals intelligence from NSA assets at Osan Air Base, had been tracking the KPA artillery buildup with increasing alarm since its 3rd week. By week 5, the intelligence assessment had reached a confidence level of high for a major KPA artillery operation against Seoul. By week 7, U.S. Forces Korea had quietly elevated its readiness posture, activated pre-planned counter-battery fire missions across its entire artillery and air assets, and pre-positioned additional ATACMS missile stocks at 3 forward fire bases below the DMZ. By week 8, 4 days before Steel Rain, The ROK U.S. Combined Forces Command had issued a classified alert to all subordinate commands. Imminent KPA artillery action, counter-battery response pre-authorized, all assets to maximum readiness. The second mistake. They had not accounted for what the past 2 years of investment in counter-artillery radar had produced. The AN/TPQ-53 Firefinder radar, 27 systems distributed across the ROK forward area, had been upgraded with a software package that reduced its time from first-round detection to firing solution output from 11 seconds to 4 seconds. 4 seconds from the moment a KPA gun fired its first shell to the moment its position was in the targeting queue. Combined with the Q-53's ability to track multiple simultaneous rounds across a wide front, the counter-battery picture would be complete within seconds of the first KPA gun firing. The KPA's artillery positions, which they believed were concealed, would be illuminated by their own first shots. The third mistake. The tunnel-mounted artillery in the Kaesong Highlands, which the KPA had assessed as its most survivable asset, protected by 60 meters of granite, had been the subject of a classified GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator employment study for 14 months. 2 B-2 Spirit stealth bombers had been pre-positioned at Andersen Air Force Base specifically for a tunnel-busting mission against the Kaesong artillery tunnels. Their GBU-57 loads had been pre-assigned to specific tunnel entrances based on overhead imagery and ground-penetrating radar data collected by RQ-4 Global Hawk drones over a period of 6 months. The bombers had been airborne since 6 a.m., orbiting at altitude over the Yellow Sea, waiting. The fourth mistake. They had calculated their 60-minute barrage window based on an assumption that South Korean and American counter-battery fires would require 20 to 25 minutes to organize and begin suppressing KPA guns. That assumption was drawn from the historical performance of counter-battery systems during the 1990s and early 2000s. It did not account for the ATACMS Block 2A missiles, GPS-guided, fired from M270 multiple launch rocket systems, which had pre-programmed target coordinates loaded into their guidance systems for every identified KPA artillery position. The ATACMS batteries were not waiting to receive fire missions. They were waiting for authorization to execute preloaded fire missions. The time from authorization to first impact was not 20 minutes. It was 4 minutes and 30 seconds. The flight time of an ATACMS missile from its launch point to the KPA gun line. The fifth mistake, the one that determined everything, was the belief that authorization for the US ROK response would require time, that the Combined Forces Command would need to confirm the attack, assess the threat, convene commanders, work through rules of engagement, and obtain political authorization before responding. The KPA General Staff had built a 30-minute decision cycle into their operational model for the American response. In reality, the pre-delegated authority for counter-battery fires against KPA artillery attacking South Korean population centers had been approved by both governments and encoded into the Combined Forces Command Standing Rules of Engagement 2 years earlier, following the intelligence assessment of KPA artillery buildup patterns. There was no decision cycle. There was a trigger. The trigger was KPA artillery firing on Seoul. The moment it happened, the response was authorized. What happened in the next 40 minutes ended the Korean People's Army's long-range artillery threat to Seoul for the foreseeable future. At 8:22 a.m. and 17 seconds, the first KCHA 170mm Koksun fired its opening round toward Seoul. The Q-53 Firefinder radar at Firebase Warrior, 11 kilometers south of the DMZ, detected the round's muzzle velocity signature and ballistic arc within 1 second of firing. By second 4, the Koksan's firing position, grid coordinate YD441882, was in the targeting queue. By second 7, the firing solution had been transmitted to the nearest ATACMS battery at Firebase Thunder, 14 kilometers to the south. By second 9, every other KPA gun in the Steel Rain order of battle had fired its first round. 172 artillery systems, 340 tunnel guns, firing simultaneously. The sound was heard in Seoul, as a continuous rolling thunder from the north. Not the sound of individual guns, but the merged acoustic signature of 512 weapons firing at once. A sound no one in the city had heard in 70 years and hoped never to hear. The first shells began impacting in northern Seoul at 8:23 a.m. The Nowon district, the Dobong district, the outer residential zones. Windows shattered. Buildings struck. The city's emergency alert system, which had been upgraded and pre-positioned to broadcast DMZ attack warnings on every screen and speaker in Seoul simultaneously, activated at 8:23 a.m. in 4 seconds, before the second volley had even been loaded. But the Q-53 radars had been tracking every single incoming round. From each round's ballistic arc, the fire control computers had back-calculated the precise firing position of every KPA gun in the opening salvo. In 11 seconds, the counter-battery targeting picture was 91% complete. In 22 seconds, it was 98% complete. Every KPA artillery position that had fired was now in the system. At 8:22 a.m. and 51 seconds, 34 seconds after the first KPA gun fired, Combined Forces Command transmitted the execute order for Operation Iron Curtain. The counter-battery package that had been preloaded, pre-aimed, and pre-authorized was released simultaneously across every U.S. and ROK artillery and air asset in the theater. The ATACMS batteries fired first. 12 M270 MLRS launchers at Firebase Thunder, 8 at Firebase Guardian, 6 at Firebase Striker, 42 launchers in total across 6 firing positions, each carrying 2 ATACMS Block 2A missiles. 84 missiles in the first salvo, fired in a compressed 39-second window that filled the sky south of the DMZ with rocket exhaust. Each missile carried a GPS-guided unitary warhead of 500 pounds, precise to within 5 meters at any range its trajectory could reach. Each missile had a preloaded target coordinate. Each coordinate corresponded to a confirmed KPA artillery position that had just fired on Seoul. Flight time, 4 minutes and 22 seconds for the nearest targets, 5 minutes and 8 seconds for the farthest. The KPA guns were loading their second volleys when the first ATACMS arrived. The impact of 84 500-pound warheads across the KPA gun line, compressed into a 47-second window, was devastating by any measure. Self-propelled artillery is built to move between firing positions. At the moment of impact, none of the Koksan guns had moved. They were in their second volley cycle, their crews focused on the fire mission, not on survival. 61 of the 84 ATACMS strikes were assessed as direct hits or within lethal radius of their assigned targets. 23 additional strikes destroyed support vehicles, ammunition carriers, and forward observer positions adjacent to the gun lines. The second ATACMS salvo was already in the air before the first had impacted. Simultaneously with the ATACMS launch, the ROK Air Force's fleet of F-16C fighters, 32 aircraft that had been on ground alert at Suwon Air Base, Cheongju Air Base, and Gwangju Air Base since 5 a.m., were airborne within 6 minutes of the execute order. Each aircraft carried 4 CBU-97 sensor-fused weapon cluster munitions and 4 GBU-38J DAMs. Their targets: the KPA-MLRS batteries, the 240mm rocket launchers that were the highest volume threat to Seoul's population. Unlike the Koksan guns, the MLRS systems could generate an enormous volume of fire very quickly, and suppressing them was the air mission's first priority. The ROK Air Force's forward air controllers, embedded with U.S. Army units at the DMZ observation posts, had been tracking the MLRS battery position since the first Q-53 returns. By the time the F-16s arrived on station at 8:31 a.m., 9 minutes after steel rain began, 51 of the 61 MLRS battery positions had been confirmed and were in the air tasking queue. In 19 minutes of continuous strike operations, the F-16 flights worked through the MLRS target list systematically. CBU-97 sensor-fused weapons dispensed their submunitions across the MLRS batteries in wide lethal area patterns, each weapon capable of destroying armored vehicles across an area the size of a city block. The 240mm MLRS systems, large, slow to displace, and requiring their crews to remain exposed during the loading cycle, were extraordinarily vulnerable to this attack profile. In 19 minutes, 47 of the 51 targeted MLRS batteries were struck and assessed as destroyed or mission-killed. The B-2 Spirits arrived over the Kaesong Highlands at 8:41 a.m., 19 minutes after steel rain began. The two stealth bombers had been holding at altitude over the Yellow Sea and had turned northeast the moment the execute order reached Anderson via secure satellite link. They were over their first target, Tunnel Complex Alpha, the northernmost of the 11 hardened artillery tunnels. At 8:41 a.m., each B-2 carried 4 GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators per tunnel complex target. The GBU-57 weighed 30,000 pounds. Its hardened steel case was designed to penetrate 60 meters of reinforced concrete or 30 meters of granite before its 6,000-pound warhead detonated. The Kaesong artillery tunnels had been bored into granite that averaged 42 meters of overhead rock. They had been built specifically to survive American air power. They had not been built to survive this. The first B-2 dropped its GBU-57 sequence against Tunnel Complex Alpha at 8:41 a.m. and 33 seconds. The first penetrator entered the tunnel entrance, the weakest point of the structure, and detonated at depth. The second followed 17 seconds later on the same trajectory, reaching deeper before detonation. The third and fourth completed the sequence. The seismic signature of the sequential underground detonations registered 2.8 on monitoring stations across the peninsula. Tunnel Complex Alpha collapsed. Its 340 meters of underground galleries, the guns within them, and the crews at their breach blocks ceased to exist as a functional military asset. Over the next 21 minutes, both B-2s worked through their target list. 11 tunnel complexes. 8 were struck by GBU-57 sequences and assessed as completely destroyed. 2 were struck and assessed as severely damaged with residual functionality reduced by 90% or greater. 1. Tunnel Complex Kilo, the deepest of the 11 at approximately 70 meters of granite overhead, was struck by the full 8-penetrator load of both aircraft combined. Assessed as collapsed at its entrance complex but with uncertain deep penetration results. At 8:49 a.m., U.S. Army Apache helicopter gunships from the 2nd Combat Aviation Brigade, 48 AH-64E Apaches that had been repositioned to forward firing positions the previous day, crossed the DMZ on a terrain-following flight profile at 200 feet altitude. Their mission: the BM-21 Grad rocket launchers that had been identified but not yet fully suppressed by the ATACMS and ROK F-16 strikes. The Apaches carried Hellfire missiles and 30mm chain gun ammunition. At low altitude in the broken terrain north of the DMZ, they were below the radar coverage of every KPA air defense system that had been tasked with protecting the artillery line. Those systems had been oriented upward and outward against fast jets, not downward against low-flying rotary-wing aircraft threading the valleys. 48 Apaches, 48 targets. In 12 minutes of continuous Hellfire engagements, 39 BM-21 Grad launchers were destroyed. The remaining 28 that had survived earlier strikes were engaged by a second Apache wave at 9:02 a.m. At 9:03 a.m., 41 minutes after the first KPA gun fired, Combined Forces Command transmitted the battle damage assessment request to all counter-battery assets. The response was compiled over the next 22 minutes from Q-53 radar returns, confirming no additional KPA artillery fire, overhead imagery from RQ-4 Global Hawks that had been orbiting at altitude throughout the engagement, and signals intelligence intercepts of KPA General Staff communications, which had shifted from attack coordination to damage assessment and emergency medical requests within 9 minutes of the first ATACMS impacts. The final tally was comprehensive, of 172 KPA long-range artillery systems committed to Operation Steel Rain. 119 destroyed 29 mission killed with repairable damage, 14 that had displaced from their firing positions before strike assets arrived and whose status was assessed as unknown. Of the 340 tunnel-mounted guns, assessed total loss across 9 of 11 complexes confirmed destroyed, remaining 2 complexes assessed as non-operational. Of 61 240mm MLRS batteries, 47 destroyed, 11 damaged. Of 67 BM-21 Grad launchers, 51 destroyed, 9 damaged. KPA personnel casualties across the artillery force, assessed by signals intelligence intercepts at between 2,100 and 2,800 killed and wounded. The crews of the guns that had fired and been struck in their firing positions, plus the tunnel artillery crews in the 9 destroyed complexes. Damage to Seoul. The 30,000 rounds the KPA had planned to fire over 60 minutes were reduced to the initial volley and parts of a second volley before suppression degraded the gun line to below operational effectiveness. Total rounds impacting Seoul and surrounding areas, assessed at approximately 3,100, roughly 10% of the planned steel rain total. The damage was significant. Buildings destroyed or severely damaged in northern Seoul districts, 214. Civilian casualties. South Korean government emergency services reported 412 killed and 1,109 wounded in the initial strikes, with the toll rising over subsequent days as rescuers reached damaged structures. Every casualty was a tragedy. The toll that Steel Rain's planners had intended, 30,000 rounds into a city of 10 million, was not reached. The counter-battery response had compressed a 60-minute barrage into 11 minutes of effective fire before suppression began degrading the KPA gun line below operational effectiveness. American casualties in the counter-battery operation. 3 soldiers wounded when a KPA counter-battery round impacted near a Q-53 radar position at Firebase Warrior at 8:29 a.m. All 3 returned to duty within 48 hours. 0 killed. ROK military casualties. 2 F-16 maintenance personnel injured on the ground at Suwon when a 240mm MLRS round impacted the base perimeter. 1 Apache helicopter sustained minor tail rotor damage from ground fire north of the DMZ and made a precautionary landing inside South Korea. Crew unharmed. In Pyongyang, state television broadcast revolutionary music for 6 hours without interruption. No public announcement was made about Operation Steel Rain or its results. No public announcement was made about the loss of the artillery force. Kim Jong-un was not seen in public for 11 days. The KPA general staff officer who had designed Steel Rain, who had spent 8 weeks positioning 172 guns within range of Seoul, who had calculated that 30,000 rounds in 60 minutes would change the political reality of the Korean peninsula forever, had been in Tunnel Complex Delta when the B-2 arrived overhead at 8:44 a.m. Tunnel Complex Delta was assessed as destroyed. The Han River bridges were undamaged. The subway system resumed partial operations by noon. The Korean Stock Exchange, which had suspended trading at 8:24 a.m., reopened at 2 p.m. The city of Seoul was wounded, grieving, and resolute. Within 72 hours, cleanup operations were underway in the damaged northern districts. International aid was flowing in, and the South Korean government had addressed the nation 3 times. Seoul stood. This is what happens when you spend 8 weeks moving artillery into range of a city and believe that the darkness and the weather have hidden your preparations from the eyes that never close and never look away. This is what happens when you design a 60-minute barrage and the counter-battery response is authorized in flight and impacting your gun line before your crews can complete their second loading cycle. The guns that were meant to break Seoul are on the bottom of their fighting positions in the granite hills north of the DMZ. The tunnels that were meant to protect them are collapsed. The crews that were meant to operate them did not survive the morning. Seoul stood. It always will.